Well, I look awful today. Good morning and hello and all that stuff. I'm going live early because I'm awake. The cat demanded to go outside, and besides, I have a ride to pick up a couple things at the grocery store this morning. So, good Tuesday morning, and welcome to another edition of whatever this is, coming to you live from, let's see, beautiful downtown Crestline in the San Bernardino Mountains of Southern California's Inland Empire, where um, this is the first day of autumn, but it's beginning to feel more like winter. And I'm going to fiddle around for a bit and allow people to wander on in. I've been promising to talk about that book, The Shadow of Blooming Grove. It's actually a biography of President Warren G. Harding, I think. Wait a minute. One of the presidents we never pay attention to. Yes, Warren G. Harding in his times. Harding became president after Woodrow Wilson. So after World War I. And he died in office. He was followed by Calvin Coolidge, his vice president. Now, Calvin Coolidge is remembered as, sorry, I'm confused here as to, because I did. I dropped stuff when I pulled the book out. Um, Coolidge became known as Silent Cal. Now, let's see. Um, uh, yeah, he's the one I believe who promised a chicken in every pot. Yep. Now, at the time, about, let's see, when was he president? He was president from 1923 when Harding died to 1929. At the time, chickens were not cheap. Uh, in other words, Coolidge was promising prosperity. We didn't get it because in 29, all the stock markets in the world crashed with rising unemployment and poverty across the world, we didn't have a chicken in every pot. Uh, and of course, he was followed by Franklin Delano Roosevelt and the Great Depression and World War II. So Harding came to office between World War I and the Great Depression. And of course, Philip K. Dick had this vision or dream in which he was reading this book, The Shadow of Blooming Grove. At the time, our president was Richard M. Nixon, and the Watergate hearings were going on. 1974. Well, that's when the visions began. I think he had the dream in 75, not totally sure. But he finally found this book, the big blue hardback, The Shadow of Blooming Grove. Where's the title isn't on the front or the back. It's on the spine. Warren G. Harding in his times. Well, there are many, many parallels, it turns out, between Warren G. Harding and Richard M. Nixon. Both did not come from great wealth like the Roosevelts and the Kennedys and a few other presidents. Both served in the Senate before running for president. Both experienced huge scandals during their time in office. Harding died in 1923 in office while the Teapot Dome oil drilling scandal was big news. He was never found to have any part in the scandal. And it was about 2 years after he died before his friends finally had their court hearing on their financial crimes. He had appointed friends to positions in his cabinet and government agencies, and they were crooked. Well, apparently Nixon had some crooked people in his administration. So that might, because of Phil's vision and the parallels, that might lead you to think that maybe Nixon wasn't in on it. And the facts that we have do indicate that while Nixon had nothing to do with the Watergate affair, in which his operatives broke into the Democratic National Headquarters, he did try to cover it up. However, while I was reading this book, I went and broke my hip. And a lot of it is about his family, his ancestors coming to the New World in colonial times. They apparently fought in the various wars, the American Revolution and the American Civil War. But Nixon's heritage is different. He didn't, I mean, Harding's ancestors entered, land that hadn't ever been farmed, and they built farms. I haven't looked into Nixon's ancestry. I probably should. But what really interests me is that there's this place called Bohemian Grove. And I think that might actually be what Phil's dream was pointing him toward. We never heard of Bohemian Grove during his lifetime. At least not that I know of. I think he would have, I think Phil would have made the connection if he had heard about it. Aha! Now here's something. A Washington Post article from June of 2011, photograph of Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan at Bohemian Grove. This Bohemian Grove is a 2,700 acre campground in Monte Rio, California. Let's see, the article here. Every July, some of the richest and most powerful men in the world gather at a 2,700 acre campground in Monte Rio, California, for 2 weeks of heavy drinking, super secret talks, druid worship. The group insists they are simply revering the redwoods and other rituals. Their purpose? To escape the frontier culture or uncivilized interests of common men. So Nixon has been there, and Reagan. You see, when Nixon resigned, his vice president, Gerald Ford, became president and then ran for election when that term was over. Ford lost to Reagan, and here we have both Nixon and Reagan at Bohemian Grove. This article has Alex Jones's fuzzy video of the cremation of care ritual with the giant stone statue of an owl. And then skipping a bit, another infiltrator, Spy magazine writer Philip Weiss, posed as a guest for 7 days in 1989 when the waiting list was 33 years long and the Grove had several thousand members. He published the article Inside Bohemian Grove. And he goes on. Oh, President Clinton claimed that he never went to the Bohemian Grove. Let's see. And there's protests outside the Grove every year, or nearly every year. The gathering is guarded. Yeah, I wouldn't try to get in there. For one thing, it's a men's club. Oh, there are women there, but for a certain purpose. I'll let you guess. Um, anyway, I don't yet see any indication that Harding ever went to Bohemian Grove. But he could have. Let's see. I went and closed that Bohemian Grove. When was it established? Uh, History. Oh, it was founded in 1872 by a group of male artists, writers, actors, lawyers, and journalists. Uh, okay. Let's see now. Who donated the land? It doesn't say. I'm not going to Wikipedia right now. I'll look into it more. I first heard of Bohemian Grove when Alex Jones shared his video, and I learned about that from the Hagman and Hagman report. But I soon quit listening to those shows because, well, for one thing, I just can't get past a paywall. I'm on a very tight budget. And for another, Alex Jones in particular was getting too way out there. And that's saying something. I can get way out there, but uh, it was just too ridiculous. The Hagman and Hagman report, sure. Well, now it's just Doug Hagman. Sadly, his son died, adult son. But there's this paywall, you see. If I want to, I can catch replays that they put up for free on YouTube. But it just is, it's okay. But, I have limited time. And by the way, Doug Hagman is a big fan of Philip K. Dick. So if you if you are a paying member of his show, you might just say hello for me. But no ill feeling. I just have moved on. Alex Jones, I think he drank the Kool-Aid. There's something really wrong with his program. I don't know the man, so I can't say that there's anything wrong with him. But uh, he seems to buy into things that couldn't possibly be true. Anyway, Bohemian Grove, I will look into whether Harding ever went there. We'll see. Apparently, it's just getting away from the unwashed masses, who, by the way, produce all the things that allow the extremely wealthy and powerful to be extremely wealthy and powerful. Yeah, rich people can buy big houses that were built by ordinary people and drive fancy cars that were built by ordinary people. They can have luxurious furniture that was made by ordinary people and wear designer clothing that was made by ordinary people, but most of them couldn't possibly build anything themselves. One exception, of course, was Howard Hughes, who took over his father's tool company and turned it into a vast industrial empire. And he was especially interested in making movies and making airplanes, mostly the airplanes. Hung out with movie stars. But you see, Howard Hughes was not one of them. He didn't come from great wealth. He was always the outsider. And the story of his last years, holed up in a hotel room in Las Vegas where he bought, I think it was the top three floors of the hotel. Anyway, he definitely owned at least one of the top floors. That is disturbing. There are still questions about whether Howard Hughes was there voluntarily or whether he was being held prisoner. I don't know, but it's scary. That sort of thing doesn't happen to the elite. And by the way, many of the elite who come from great wealth are really descended from the old robber barons. People who hired thugs to drive out competition. If another business was competing with this robber baron's business, he'd hire thugs to beat up the workers, burn down the buildings, threaten the family of the owner. Nasty business. You know, the Rockefellers, the Gettys, the big oil companies. I'm not sure where the Roosevelts got their money. That would be interesting. I just know that President Teddy Roosevelt, Theodore, and uh, President Franklin Roosevelt were, I didn't even write get their money, and good old Google. Okay. Aha. Franklin Roosevelt. What was the source of the Rose FDR family wealth? Apparently, FDR was buying and selling things. His father James died in 1900, left a small inheritance, but with the aid of his mother's money or by borrowing on the collateral of her estate, Roosevelt bought and sold things and built wealth. Well, Teddy Roosevelt who was I think he was a cousin or an uncle of FDR. He wasn't poor by any means. Probably speculated in the stock market. I'll look into it more deeply when I get a chance. So, at one time, these wealthy and powerful elites were young upstarts, the nouveau riche. They didn't come from money, but now their descendants are old money. Howard Hughes was new money, and he designed, by the way, aircraft for our military in World War II. The spruce goose is only the tip of the iceberg. He designed an airplane made of wood. It would be more difficult for the enemy to find if it was not made of metal. It could also float on the ocean. It still exists. It's in a museum somewhere. But the Army never bought that design, or so they say. I happen to have seen an example of what the military doesn't buy. Back in the 90s, there were two competing companies, Boeing and I forget who the other one was, to design the new stealth fighter. Well, the Air Force bought the one that came to be known as a Blackbird. It's wedge shaped and totally black, has a very small radar footprint, and it on radar it looks kind of like a bird instead of a great big jet fighter. They bought that one, right? Well, after all was said and done, I have personally seen the other design. I think it was Boeing designed the one that's white with a black belly. Looks like a skinny baby space shuttle. Well, if they didn't buy it, how come the Air Force was still flying them? In fact, there was an item on the network news about people in Anaheim, home of Mickey Mouse, uh, Anaheim, California, seeing a UFO in the sky, and they showed film footage. It was that little white stealth fighter with the black belly that the Air Force supposedly did not buy. Well, somebody must have bought it. It was flying around in our skies, and I was just laughing my head off. What do you mean UFO? That's an airplane. And I saw one over March Air Force Base at the time. Now it's National Guard something or other. It's one of the bases that President Clinton was going to shut down. There was a grassroots movement of, hey, why are we funding military bases all over the world when we have economic problems at home? So, what did Clinton do? He shut down bases in the United States. And he was going to shut down March Air Force Base, but that base has the only airstrip on the West Coast that can accommodate the big cargo jets. I think at the time they had C 130s. the great big ones that could carry supplies and personnel. Although my students, see, I was teaching, my students told me it really wasn't fun to ride on one of those because it was designed for cargo, but they would ride on it if they needed to get to where they were going, or if they were ordered to. I'm looking at the bookcase behind me. Either the bookcase is crooked or the wall is crooked because it looks tilted. I'll worry about that later. I think the bookcase is tilted. Time to wedge a thin strip of wood, like one of those stir sticks that you get when you buy paint. Wedge that under the low side so it's up higher. I think maybe the wall is also crooked. I'll have to get a level and check it out. Anyway, many of the UFOs we see really are ours, but they'll never tell us. And the government is not going to disclose UFOs. For one thing, they don't know. And they aren't going to admit that they don't know. You see, there is no the government. There's a huge array of different offices with people sitting at desks, and one guy knows one thing and another guy knows another thing. And there are very few, if any, people who know everything or even almost everything about UFOs or anything else. And some people don't even understand that what they know has anything to do with UFOs or space aliens or what's the other one? Oh, aliens who are not from another planet that live right here. Usually the story is they live in caves underground or in bases built on the floor of the ocean, uh, but they're not human, but they're people. I don't know. My best guess, and it's an educated guess, is that in our ancient past we colonized other planets and something bad happened. I, I think a war against a real alien race, and our colonists came home and being adapted to life on a completely different planet with a completely different environment from what we have here, they had trouble fitting in. The gravity, the air pressure, everything was different. Now, that's an interesting thing, the air pressure. We need our standard 15 pounds per square inch of atmospheric pressure to keep our insides inside. In particular, our blood wants to escape through our skin. Uh, and of course, if you cut your skin, you bleed because the blood wants to escape. So, on a planet with less air pressure, you'd have a bleeding problem. But with more air pressure, you might not be able to breathe. This 15 pounds per square inch is pretty much right for our lungs. but the amount of oxygen in our air is actually too low for humans to thrive. We should have more oxygen. And darn it, I really want an oxygen treatment, can't get one. I don't have a condition that calls for it, but I've often wondered if, when the divers get the beds, they put them in this. I had the word a minute ago. This capsule that's sealed, and they put in high pressure oxygen to cure them of the bends. Hyperbaric chamber. I wonder how many people would have much better health if they just had a few minutes or hours in a hyperbaric chamber getting flushed with oxygen. It's under pressure so that even if you don't breathe in the oxygen, it gets into you through your skin. The bends is from nitrogen bubbles in your, I guess it's in your bloodstream, but it causes your muscles to cramp up. And I see the nitrogen bubbles are from the compressed air you breathe underwater. And if you come up too fast and the outside pressure of the water drops too fast, the nitrogen turns into little air bubbles that wreak havoc with your body. Anyway, I think we need more oxygen. And right now, Southern California is on fire. The air has smoke even when you can't smell it. It has all kinds of nasty, um, invisible micro particles of all kinds of bad stuff. And by the way, the fires were not caused by global warming, they were caused by humans. The one nearest me was caused when some people set off a pyrotechnic device, that's a firework, in a field of dry grass to announce the gender of their baby. Fireworks are illegal in this entire county. And the label on their little firework has all kinds of warnings that they obviously ignored. They went to a park and set off this. What it does is it makes smoke, and if it's blue, it's a boy, if it's pink, it's a girl. And it emits sparks. And they set it down in a field of dry grass at a local park to make a video of their gender reveal to tell everyone whether their baby was a boy or a girl. It set the grass on fire, which soon set the trees and bushes on fire, and now that fire is over 22,000 acres. Mostly in the forest, but we've lost some houses and outbuildings, and one of our firefighters, a crew chief of a hotshot team, died in that fire. I haven't found any information on the cause of death, but um, he died because of idiots who didn't know better than to set off fireworks in a field of dry grass, no less. They could at least have put it on some bricks or something. or had some fire extinguishers handy, or at least a bucket of water. Idiots. They've ruined their own lives as well as the lives of others. That fire's been burning for, I think, a couple weeks now. It's in rough terrain, so they've relied primarily on aircraft dropping water and check. But because there are other bigger fires in California that need the resources, it's been hard to get the aircraft that they need. They have managed to form a perimeter, and every time a hot spot jumps the perimeter, the hand crews are there to use their shovels and other tools to put it out. And they have, of course, fire trucks with some water to spray on the flames. But one of our firefighters died, lived, lived in Big Bear up on this mountain. Well, I suppose he was doing what he loved, but that fire was totally unnecessary. In Oregon, they've arrested at least 6 arsonists. People caused those fires. They deliberately set the fires. And in California, the news is kind of muted, but there's one woman in particular. I was looking at the fire maps and going up Highway 101, which is near the west coast of California, runs all the way up into Oregon. And on the fire map, there's all these little dots indicating fires all along 101 for over 600 miles. Sure enough, a woman was arrested for setting all of those fires. So don't tell me it was global warming. The earth gets warmer, the earth gets colder, it just does that. And maybe things that we do contribute to it, but we are not the major cause. And besides, as recently as the 1970s, all the alarmists were telling us that we were about to enter an ice age and we'd better quit burning fossil fuels because they were causing the earth to cool. They can't make up their minds. And and then there's this COVID thing. Everything's shut down. And who's hurting? Walmart is okay. Amazon is okay. Best Buy, Home Depot. Oh, there is no Kmart. Target has been shutting down their brick and mortar stores, but Target's doing very well online. The big stores are doing just fine. And most grocery stores, the big chains, let's see, Winn-Dixie, Kroger, oh, and Costco and Sam's Club are just fine. It's the little mom and pop shops that are suffering. Let's say well, they've been shut down, but let's say a riot breaks out and a bunch of stores burn down. Well, Costco can either build a new one if their store burns down, or just cut their losses and focus on the ones that haven't been burned down. You burn down some mom and pop little grocery store, they're done. They probably don't even have insurance, and most insurance policies don't cover rioting anyway. You've just made them poor. You've destroyed everything they've worked for, everything they have, and all the people who relied on buying their groceries or clothing or whatever at this little mom and pop shop now have to travel 20 miles to get the same things from some big corporate store that does nothing for their community, maybe provides a couple low wage jobs. But mom and pop are out on the street. The community has lost a meeting place where they get to know their neighbors. And the economy, it sucks for small business people and ordinary people who shop at their stores. And I don't care what the cause is, what the protests are about when it comes to rioting and looting and burning. That's just plain wrong. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. led a march of thousands and perhaps millions of people marching on Washington, D.C., and they didn't burn down anything. They were not rioting and looting, and they got things done. These current protests, with all the looting and burning and killing, beating people up, shooting people, burning down buildings, it hasn't accomplished anything. All that it has accomplished is for some athletes to boycott a ball game. That's it. Oh, and I think it's University of Chicago, a big, well-known university with a strong program in English literature, has decided that for their graduate program, they will accept only students who want to study Black literature. I don't see literature as Black or white or Asian or African or Northern European or Russian. Yeah, I had to read Russian literature in college, but it was part of a class not on Russian literature, but on literature of the 1800s. I had like 17th century literature, 18th century literature from all over the world, from all kinds of different people. And when I studied American literature, yeah, a lot of it was written by white men, but a lot of it wasn't. Some was written by women, some was written by, um, we didn't call them African Americans then, but Black people who, one way or another, got out of slavery. I'm trying to remember the guy's name. Ah, the big one. Wrote basically a diary. And I have a book with it somewhere. I'm terrible at names. But he escaped from slavery and became an important public figure in the north in a free state. I just totally blank on his name. Anyway, one of the 20th century books I really enjoyed was called Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe, an African, not African American, African. Let me see. Let me check his. Yeah, he was born in Nigeria and died in Boston, Massachusetts. Chinua Achebe. Things Fall Apart. It was an examination of the. Oh, he didn't. He was born in 1930 and died in 2013, age 83, I guess. Things Fall Apart examines how the culture of a tribe changed when Christian missionaries and um, European colonists arrived. And it is not a polemic, it's a story that you really get into. I've, People have trouble pronouncing some of the characters' names, like Okonkwo, and I'm not entirely convinced that I'm pronouncing it right, but that's how I deciphered it. Okonkwo is like the major character. He wants to hold on to the old ways, but his wives like the new ways in which they have more freedom and they aren't their husband's property. I think he has three wives. Anyway, he's a big shot under the old system and he sees himself losing power. At the beginning of the story, a pair of twins is born. Are born? Anyway, a woman gives birth to twins. And the custom is to just leave them out in the jungle because twins are such bad luck. Which, by the way, was the practice all over the Mediterranean in ancient times, especially in Greece. Well, they put the twins out in the jungle to let the gods decide whether they will live, because they can't kill them. That would be wrong. And the Christian missionaries find these twin infants and adopt them and take care of them. And nothing bad happens. And the twins are happy, healthy children. And that's when the people of the village begin to think, hey, these Christian missionaries aren't so bad after all, and maybe twins aren't so bad after all. It's a great story, and I recommend you read it. He doesn't Achebe doesn't preach at you. He just shows you the story of how an ancient culture is dismantled piece by piece and how it helps some people and hurts others. Now, I'm really against colonization. The European nations, including England, colonized what they called undeveloped lands. They were developed, but they were not developed in the same way as Europe. They weren't industrial. They didn't have the feudal system of the lord owning all the land and the peasants working for the lord. The Well, anyway, the European industrial nations, and even before what we think of industry, they needed raw resources. So they told themselves the big lie that the people who already lived there needed their help to rise up and become civilized. Well, to a certain extent, that was a good thing. And by the way, what's her name lied? Oh, come on, the anthropologist, Samoa author, not Robert Louis Stevenson, um, anthropologist. It's a woman with three names. Oh, come on, anthropologist. Coming of Age in Samoa by Margaret Mead. Well, I guess she doesn't have three names. Margaret Mead. Thank you, Tim. Yeah. Well, she probably didn't know that she was lying, but later journalists interviewed the Samoan people that she talked to, and they said, oh, yeah, we lied to her and she believed everything we said. My oldest brother was in Guam and Samoa. He went back and forth. American Samoa, by the way, the half of the island that's still part of the U.S. A territory. He went back and forth, and he told me from his experience that so many children in Samoa committed suicide that the death certificate would just say natural causes. And that was in 1990. Let me check my dates. Oh, it was in 97. I had to mentally add his age of 50 to his birth date. He was born in 48, but this was before he turned 50. So that'd be 1997. On the Samoan side, in particular, children committed suicide all the time because their life was so horrible. They'd usually hang themselves from a high tree branch. It was a lot like ancient Sparta, in which after children were weaned, no longer drinking their mother's milk, they were on their own. They had to steal food, and if they got caught, they were beaten, not for stealing food, but for getting caught. Well, anyway, I guess that made them tough warriors, but a lot of them had to die along the way. And in a way, that is eugenics, genetic cleansing. eliminating the weak before they can reproduce. People have been doing that for thousands of years with their farm animals and with people. The weak die and never have children. We've been crossbreeding plants and animals for thousands of years to get better crops and better livestock. But today, the scientists want to take shortcuts and meddle directly with the DNA. That's scary. And that can lead to disaster. You'll end up with a bunch of mutants like in a Philip K. Dick novel. And maybe they'll be sterile. They won't be able to have children. Margaret Sanger. Yeah, Margaret Sanger founded Planned Parenthood as part of her crusade for eugenics, cleansing the human race, eliminating. Where's my other shoe? Eliminating people with dark skin from the gene pool. Now, I've studied enough science to know that actually it's Caucasians, people like me with light skin, who are defective. We should have at least a nice tan. It's healthier. I don't tan. I have freckles all over. They're hard to see on this video, but even my face has freckles. And my arms. Not my legs. They're just kind of yellowish white, pinkish white. Anyway, I don't tan. That's a defect. People with dark skin are healthier. Now, there's an extreme where they're so dark that it just doesn't seem right, but I don't know of any bad health effects from being too dark. But people with light skin are much more prone to skin cancer and to a few other things, like going bald, getting gray hair earlier in life. So Margaret Sanger was nuts. And Planned Parenthood today still has most of their clinics in poor neighborhoods where people are ethnic minorities. In other words, Black or Hispanic, Latino, people with dark skin. I'm sorry, but white people are defective, and I'm one of them, sort of. People who know Indians look at my cheekbones and they know I'm a Native American. I don't have much Cherokee in me, but I must be a throwback because I've seen reservation Cherokee who look just like me. And some of them even have my maiden name. They're Busbys, which is interesting. I've forgotten the first name, but one of my direct ancestors was named Busby, and he had a child by his black house slave, and their son, he gave their son his freedom, not much else, but their son is my direct ancestor. So that's how I came to be a Busby. But apparently, It's my line, my direct line of Busbys that kept marrying Cherokee men and women. So there's a lot of Cherokee named Busby. And so, of course, I have a little drop of black blood too, because Grandpa's grandpa was half black and married a woman who was Cherokee. She was named Louise Clark after Lewis and Clark, the famous explorers of the American West. They missed a lot of the West, like the Southwest. But anyway, I didn't get the gene that would allow me to get a tan. I can't even go to the beach here in the daytime. I burn very badly, and it's really life. It can be life threatening. Even if I wear a long sleeved shirt and long pants, I still get a sunburn, really bad one. I can go at night, and up north, say north of San Francisco, Sonoma, and that area, I can go to the beach in the daytime because the sun doesn't hit as directly, but I don't stay long. Wow. And this started with Bohemian Grove and Blooming Grove. I think I really need to read more of this book, and maybe now I can, but I've been tearing the house apart searching for things. I well, some people cleaned up while I was gone, and their intentions were good, but some things went missing, and uh, my boxes of stuff were repacked in ways that stuff that didn't belong together ended up in the same box. I've, I've, I've tracked down most of what I needed to track down, but I didn't have time to read because I was slow already, and after I broke my hip, I became really slow. Now, I'm not that bad off. I can walk without a cane, but I don't do much walking. It's still painful. My muscles in my hurt leg, it isn't really a bad leg, it's a hurt leg. The muscles get aches because I can't quite move that leg naturally. Now, it was a clean break, no problems there, except they put in two screws to hold the bones together while they heal. Not a huge deal, not a major surgery, although they did knock me out for it. But, because my leg doesn't move naturally, I get muscle aches that I've never had before. And sometimes if I sit down wrong or too firmly, too fast, I get an ouchie, a sharp pain that goes away. But it really isn't that bad. Once in a while, I take a 3 milligram aspirin, and I alternate the heating pad and the ice pack. I'm not on pain meds. I can't tolerate the opioids, and the only thing that really works for me is either aspirin or ibuprofen. And ibuprofen is basically aspirin. It just has a tiny change in the molecule to make it a little gentler on your stomach. I wasn't allowed to use them while I was on blood thinners. Old Smokies? Deacon, what's an old Smoky? Oh, oh, do you mean my kitty cat? Mm, oh, a reefer. No, I don't like pot. I tried it in high school. I inhaled. Don't like it. I'm goofy enough without getting high. I had Vicodin about 10 years ago when I broke my other leg. Didn't touch the pain, it just got me high. And I had to take a second pill to stop the vomiting. And I didn't need to be loopy and high when I had my one leg in a splint from the hip down to the ankle, and I had to rely on crutches. Then I started having withdrawal symptoms between doses, so I got rid of the Vicodin. When I After my surgery on my hip, they put morphine into the IV. It burned going through my vein and it made me vomit and it didn't touch the pain and I didn't even get high. I mean, I'd grab the barf bag and it would floop like one of those party favors. I couldn't keep down any water and I was already dehydrated. So I just fussed and fumed until they quit putting morphine into my IV. Don't like pain meds. Aspirin, I wish I could, I probably can if I look into it. Get the original white willow bark instead of the chemical aspirin that you buy at the grocery store or the pharmacy or Rite Aid. Anyway, give me aspirin. Ibuprofen's okay. You see, Tylenol does nothing for inflammation, which is a major problem when you have an ouchie. The swelling, the inflammation. And I wasn't allowed to use it because they put me on blood thinners to prevent a pulmonary embolism. You know, a blood clot that ends up in your lungs. So, anyway, I'm off of the blood thinners and on to, well, once in a while, 3 milligrams of aspirin. And when I was a kid, one aspirin was 5 milligrams, but three will do. Anyway, uh, the hip is not that bad, but I can't do a number of things. There are things I simply cannot do while it's healing. Some I'm not allowed to do, and some I physically cannot do. But I managed to put on jeans instead of a skirt. What I have to do is lasso my foot on the hurt side. Kind of lay the jeans on the floor and come over and lasso my foot. I can't get my hand down to my foot, and I can't get my foot up to put my foot in the jeans, but I can lasso them. But not every time. Some days I still have to wear a skirt because I can't quite lasso my foot. But I've had some physical therapy. Right now I'm on the heating pad, but in a while I'll switch to the ice pack. That works and it doesn't make me loopy, and basically it doesn't cost me any money. My water's empty, so if I'm going to keep talking, I got to go fill the water glass. Hang on. I can walk, but I'm slow and I have to be really careful. Don't want to fall again. Okay, up on the good foot. Uh, Gimpy, gimpy, hobble, hobble. Okay. Oh, Tora Kitty will not be greeting her adoring fans this morning because she's gone outside to play with the outside kitties. Hmm. Let's just check my internet connection. Yeah, it's still working. Good. Well, anyway, Blooming Grove, Warren G. Harding. Phil, when he found that book and recognized it as the book in his vision, he sat down and read it and concluded that it was the most boring book he'd ever read and that it had nothing to do with his visions and his experiences. He blamed Richard Nixon for his problems, and apparently he wasn't too far off. You know, the burglaries of his house, the oppression, true oppression he suffered at the hands of unknown people, and some he knew but was convinced they were uh, using assumed identities. They were not who they said they were. I think that one of the federal agencies, probably the Drug Enforcement Agency that President Nixon created, was after Phil because he had a very slight connection to Dr. Timothy Leary, the LSD advocate, and to John Lennon. And you see, once you come to the attention of the authorities, they never let up. They know you're up to something and they're going to find out what it is. Yeah, well, Phil ended up, thank you, Tim. Phil ended up in a rehab facility in Canada after a suicide attempt that he didn't even remember. He went out walking down the street to the pharmacy to get some aspirin for a headache. And the next thing he knew, he was sitting on the floor of his apartment in Vancouver, British Columbia. I have to say that because there's a Vancouver in Washington State. So he He's walking down the street to go buy some aspirin. Wakes up on the floor of his apartment, and next to him are an empty water glass and an empty pill bottle. So he called for help. And because he was an American, he didn't have the Canadian health plan. He also didn't have any money. So the only place that would take him was Excalais, First Nation language for the path. So he stayed there. I'm not sure how long. I think he said 2 weeks before he got a little money and got on an airplane and came to Orange County, California. But one of the major memories he recovered in 1974 when he was taking mega doses of vitamins and really uh, adjusting his diet and so forth to be more healthy. He remembered that he was dragged off the street by two men in black suits who shoved him into the back of a limousine and drove him around for several hours. He was drugged and hypnotized and told to kill himself. And he almost succeeded. You see, Phil could be very dramatic. He could threaten to kill himself. He could even go through the motions. But he didn't want to die. And that one almost did kill him. In 1976, when he supposedly attempted suicide, he claimed that when he went into the garage with all the doors shut and started the car, he claimed the car wouldn't keep running. It kept stalling. Well, I later drove that car and there was nothing wrong with it. He claimed that he slashed his wrists. Well, he had a couple superficial cuts that were not anywhere near to being life-threatening, but he had been taking diuretics for his high blood pressure, and he was not taking potassium supplements. If he had not ended up in the emergency room with a so-called suicide attempt, he would have died. The doctor ran a blood test and discovered that his potassium level was so low that his heart was about to stop beating. And they injected potassium in the IV, and Phil said it burned and hurt really bad. But it saved his life. After that, he had potassium supplements, along with his blood pressure medication. He wasn't trying to die. He was making a dramatic scene because his girlfriend dumped him. And a few months later, he rented an apartment for his new girlfriend and moved out. And had the nerve to tell people he tried to kill himself because I left. He's the one who moved out. He made stuff up all the time. He had to make the story dramatic and believable, and it wasn't believable. If I left him, how come he had all our furniture? Hmm? Yeah, and there's this story Tim Powers tells about me and my brother taking all the furniture. Well, the only time Tim was there was when my brother brought us a new coffee table and helped us by taking the old one out to the dumpster. So I don't know what Tim's talking about. There was another instance when Phil told me to leave and he was really scary, so I did. And I got my other brother to come with me along with my sister in law so I could get our son's clothes and toys. And I spent the night with my parents, with my dad and his wife, not mom. Uh, and Tim wasn't there. K.W. Jeter was there. He must have told Tim the story and got it all twisted. But Phil, that then called his girlfriend and said, you can move in now, Tess is gone. And she said no, dumped him on the spot. I guess she had some sense of not splitting up a couple with a 3-year-old child. And that's when he made his dramatic so called suicide attempt. That actually saved his life. He would have died. Ironic, I guess. But he didn't want to die. He wanted his girlfriend to move in with him. And a few months later, the other girlfriend, the newer one, did move in with him. I have nothing against Doris Sauter. I always liked her. She's passed away, well, in the early 2000s, I think. I miss her. She was so nice, and I liked her a lot. But the other girlfriend, the one that dumped him, oh, Phil told me all about her. She had a cat, and he complained about things about her, and I'm like, you're telling your wife about all about your girlfriend? You're weird. He was trying to make me jealous, and I just don't go there. If you can't keep it in your pants, well, he claimed it wasn't sexual, that he didn't have sex with her. I don't care. He wasn't taking me to dinner and a movie. That's what I cared about. And even when we went out somewhere, he acted like he wasn't with me. So I quit going out with him. No point in being humiliated in public while he's flirting with every skirt in the place. He was not a good husband, but he was an excellent father. And I made sure that he continued to have a good relationship with his son. And I'm glad I did. Well, our son is a good man, and he adored his father, and that's a good thing. But later, sometime after our divorce, Phil told me, and I don't know if it's a story or, oh, hi, IB Collectibles. I don't know whether this was a story made up or for real. I tend to think it was real. He said that Phil said that his enemies were still after him, and he was afraid they tried to get through to him through the people he loved. So he had to pretend that he hated me so that his enemies wouldn't go after me. Maybe. Or maybe it's the story he told himself to make it okay. I mean, he was married 5 times and had lots of girlfriends in between, which I didn't know when I met him or even when I married him. But he wasn't capable of being faithful. And it really bothered him that I wouldn't get jealous. It just isn't in me. If you don't want to be with me, I don't want to be with you. Plain and simple. If I can't trust you, good riddance. Oh, Oscar Wilde, every man destroys what he loves. I don't know, maybe women do as well. But I got a wonderful little baby boy who grew up to be a very good man. Yeah, I think Phil was almost experiencing puppy love like most kids do in high school. I mean, he couldn't stand to be without me. He'd go with me to the grocery store because he didn't want to be apart for a whole half an hour. But then eventually, his phobias took over and he couldn't leave the house. He chose his apartment in his condo. It was an apartment originally. He chose it in Santa Ana because he could walk to everything, the bank, the grocery store, and so forth, because he was really afraid to drive. There's some kind of noise going on. It's either the cat or the neighbors. I'm not getting up to check because it isn't that easy for me to get up and walk outside anymore. But this will heal. It's temporary. I'll get through it. And I'm supposed to be writing a story, one that I'll actually get paid for. Well, I have a story that I am getting paid for. Um, I guess I should find the link, huh? If my internet will support. I have a story in an anthology or miscellany, a collection of stories called Mirror Maze. Mirror Maze. Mirror Maze. That's the title of the book. Now let's see if I can find the. It's a dream punk anthology, and trying to find the link to pre-order. It's due out on December 8th, but they're taking pre-orders. Well, that isn't it. What the hiss? Where'd it go? I lost it. Oh, come on. Come on. What the hiss? Oh, here we go. Mirror Maze, a dream punk anthology. And the publisher is Fractured Mirror. And my story is titled The Mirror Cracked. Okay, now. Let me see if this is it. Yes. You can pre-order the book at the link I just dropped in the chat. And it also has links to like the Mirror Maze website and stuff. My story includes a cat and a mirror. And it's fantasy, a dreamlike fantasy set in a world that's oddly, I wrote this before COVID, and it's about a world in which a plague wipes out most of humanity. Maybe I'm a precog to some extent. I think Phil was. He could see bits of the future. Not reliably, not continuously, but here and there in a flash. Anyway, I have been on for an hour and almost 40 minutes. But I'm writing another story for a publisher in Austria. He doesn't seem to know what he's doing, but he's willing to pay in advance before he gets my story. The only thing he said that he wants is he wants it to be weird. Well, that's my métier, the weird, the strange, unusual, and weird. But I do have my story in Mirror Maze, and the other authors have some really great stories in there too, but I'll let them plug their own stories. Wow. So anyway, time for me to attempt to put on clean clothes so I can go pick up a few groceries. I went to the grocery store once since I've been home, but I overdid it and got very, very tired. And that's why I'm up early in the morning. It threw off my schedule because fell asleep during the day and I'm having trouble staying up past 8, 7 or 8 in the evening. And I keep making myself stay up later and later, so I'll wake up after the sun starts to rise instead of before. Anyway, I gotta get going, so thank you all for listening, and I'll be back one of these days, probably on a Tuesday, maybe more often. Right now, it's the end of the internet cycle, so I don't have a whole lot of bandwidth, and YouTube uses a lot of bandwidth. So um, I'm rationing it. And thank you, Jimmy, and good to see you here. And all of you have a wonderful day and a wonderful rest of the year. Stay healthy and be good. Bye bye.